So I like natural wood bowls. I like segmented bowls. I like a combination of segmented with natural wood, and I don't mind epoxy. But this week I put all three together. I'm still not sure if it's something I like or not. This project is one that I flip-flopped on quite a bit. Let me know what you think, whether I made a good decision or not. So here's some of the starting materials for this project. I had some oak cut-offs that I ended up using in a segmented fashion. So the first step is I got a glue block ready. You've seen me do this before. I have hot melt glue and an electric frying pan, and I completely covered the bottom of this piece that's going to become my tenon. Then I glued that on to a round circle. The next step was to make the segments. Here I'm using my wedgie sled. Again, I've shown this in other videos, and there's lots of YouTube videos around on how to make this, but it does make for very precise segmented pieces. Here's the first piece going on. I marked a circle on my ring, glued the first piece on. Here are the rest. You'll probably notice that half of them are missing. That's because they're going to be filled with epoxy. For this project, it's really a fusion of solid wood, segmented, and epoxy, as I mentioned. Here I am just taking a round log and cutting it down. Now this wood is wet. You'll see how quickly it cuts down. Look at the shavings coming off on my arm. And by the way, this is in real time. I have not sped this video up. So it just gives you an idea of how easily this cuts. A lot of times you watch YouTube videos, if you see wood chips flying like this, chances are it's wet wood. Dry wood does not cut this quickly. Now I have the outside shaped. The next step is to hollow out the inside. So to make it a bit easier, I just use my Forstner bit. Now if you look very closely, you'll probably notice that there's smoke coming out of this. There is, because it's wet. It's actually not smoke. It's not burning probably as much as it is steam. The heat generated from drilling is causing the water in the wood to turn into steam. So here it is, completely hollowed out. You'll notice the two different sizes, the top and bottom are different. And now this will go into my kiln to dry. It's about 30% moisture right now. Now to move on to the next part of the project, I'm going to glue wooden pieces of oak onto this sacrificial centerpiece, which later will get cut out. In order to calculate the size of segments I need to know the diameter fairly precisely, and that's what I'm doing here. Now you can see multiple staves glued around the outside. Again, you'll notice that I'm only gluing staves on every other one. Every other one is missing. And again, that's because that's going to be filled with epoxy. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know a couple things. I don't always work with epoxy, but the other thing is I'm cheap and epoxy is expensive. So I'm going to try and form it up the best that I can and make the form just as big as what I need. That's why I'm putting this sacrificial piece here in the center. I know some other wood turners will just drop the wood into a bucket, fill the whole thing, and then cut it down. I tend to try and form it up as closely as I can to save on the amount of epoxy that I'm going to use. So here I'm just attaching the stave at the top and the bottom, because later I want to remove those from that sacrificial piece. Here you can see all the staves glued onto that sacrificial piece. Now they're all formed up, so I just use some shelf liner that I actually get at the dollar store. I wrap those around what I need to fill with epoxy, and I use a lot of hot melt glue to seal it up. Hot melt glue is the best way of sealing it up. So this is going to be the body of the piece I'm making this week. So this went in my kiln at 30% moisture. 5 days later it came out, it's less than 10. So that's good. Otherwise that would have taken months to dry. Now I did get one crack right here that's opened up pretty good. The rest of these were minor cracks, like just hairline, so I put CA glue on them, so I'll clean that up. I don't see them anymore. The CA glue will pull them together and prevent them from getting any worse. And that's typical up around the opening here. Remember, this was the center of the tree, so that was the pith. I removed it, but still, you will tend to get some radial cracks. Again, that's the worst, but that's all going to be covered anyways, so that's not an issue. It still turns out that it's got nice grain pattern to it. I think it's going to be a nice complement to the overall piece. All right, let's talk a little bit about this. These two pieces here, which are going to be the bottom of the bowl, the bottom of the vase, the middle section, they're like a dental piece. You saw how I put the wood in there and then formed up the epoxy around it. So they didn't leak too bad. A little bit came out of this one. I was able to put some more hot melt glue on it. Hot melt glue does work the best as far as preventing the leaks. I probably could have done a bit better job there, but overall, it didn't leak as much as what you see here. A lot of that came from this piece, but these two are in good shape. It's hardened up enough I could take it out of the form. This here that's spilt is still a bit malleable, but I think certainly not ready to turn yet, but I could take it out of the form. Although no hurry, because I'm not going to be able to turn it yet. This piece here, you can see it dropped down about 3/4 of an inch. So I did lose some here, and that's what you see over here on the side. Again, it was leaking. I put some more hot melt glue on and some more tuck tape. If I had done a bit better job with that, I think I could have prevented it. It's fine. I wanted to cut this top half, 3/4 of an inch off anyways, because I hot melt glued each of these pieces to my center ring. So I want to get rid of that. So I was planning on getting rid of that anyways. So that's not that big of a deal. All right, we're going to get these cleaned up a little bit. Again, they won't be ready to turn for another day or so. So it's turning fairly balanced, so it's centered well. I'm going to true up this tin in here a bit. Not true it up, clean it up, because it's got epoxy on it. And then, as I mentioned, you can see where the epoxy line ends and the wood starts. I'm going to trim that back. That's also going to serve the purpose, as I mentioned, of removing the glue that I used to glue these staves on with. So now that the epoxy is set up, I'm just trimming both the top and the bottom. As I mentioned, the epoxy had sunk down a bit, exposing those staves, the ends of them. I want to cut those off anyways to remove the glue. Here you can see both ends have been squared up, and now I'm just cleaning the epoxy that spilt out around the inside of the form, covering up some of those wooden staves. Here you can see there's still a little bit left to come on. I'm also checking it for flatness. My plan was that it would be uniformly flat, top to bottom, but slightly tapered. It's hard to get a nice smooth edge with the carbide tool, so I just went over with a negative rake scraper. Although, unfortunately, the negative rake scraper with the epoxy doesn't leave a good finish. So I'll do a final finish cut with the carbide tool, but you'll see here I'm taking a very light pass because at this point I don't want to change the shape. Now here I am hollowing it out, just drilling it, and again you can see that even this wood, although it was a piece of 2x4 that had been around forever, 4x4, it's still a little bit wet, and there is some moisture in there because I am creating a little bit of steam. My goal here will be to drill all the way through and then just take any remaining material out. Because I am going to glue another piece on top, I want to flatten it out. For this, I use a nice flat board that I have with a piece of coarse sandpaper glued on. And as long as you hold that across the top, you'll end up with a nice flat surface. Here we have just a little teaser. I just set the piece on top so you'll see what it looks like. Now this is how I attach the next piece. So I'm just using CA glue going all around the rim, and then I'll go and push this in using my lathe as a clamp. I had a center mark on that, so it actually centers it very well because the bottom vase is located on the chuck, and then the bottom that I glue on, I get centered because I have that center mark. Once it's glued on and pressed into place, then I'll just clean up the transition point from that bottom decorative epoxy piece and the bowl of the vase itself. Same principle as before. Here I am with the top piece glued onto that bowl section. Now here I'm just forming up a piece for the final pour of epoxy. Again, hot melt glue, it is the best means of preventing any epoxy leaks. And I'm just glued two 2x4s together to make a 4x4 block, and I'm going to temporarily glue it onto the very top section of my vase. Here I'm just marking an annulus on the top of the 2x4, which matches up with the opening of that top section. And then once I get that annulus marked out, I'll cut a groove in it, and that's where I'll pour my epoxy. So this epoxy has dried overnight. It's still not fully cured, still a little soft. I can indent it. But the good news is no leaks. So I just glued some 2x4s on there, just small scrap. Hot melt glue. Again, hot melt glue is your best defense against leakage. Actually, I say no leakage. There was a drop there, but that's it. That'll turn away very easily and leave me with an epoxy rim that I can finish up. So I'm going to let that sit. I may turn this off because it's not soft enough that it will deform at this point, but I won't be able to work the epoxy yet. But that will allow me to do some final sanding and clean up of some of the joints. So for cleanup, I've just installed my steady rest here. I just want to show that how that looked. It's useful for when you're working inside. I did need to do a little bit of cutting inside, clean up, and it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the tenon without the steady rest. Here I want to talk a little bit about my shavings. When I'm working with epoxy, the shavings that are coming off are a combination of wood and epoxy, of course. Normally I compost my wooden shavings, but because of the epoxy, I'm not able to do that. So I do end up bagging these and throwing them out. I won't show it all here, but I'm just going to go ahead and show a bit of the sanding, similar to what I normally do. Just working my way up through 80 to 600 grit. One nuance with this, two nuances actually. One is I can't get my sanding pad on the drill inside, so I just have to sand that by hand. But the other thing is with epoxy, you tend to get lines in the direction of the turning. So I stop and sand by hand going against those lines, going with the grain in order to remove any of those scratches that occurred from sanding with the lathe turning. And here's the final product. I didn't show it, but I used my abrasive paste and abrasive polish to apply a finish to it, and I'll include some more shots here in a moment. So here's the finished product. I like how the solid wood went together with the segmented pieces. I like the color, but I'm still a little torn on the overall shape and design of the project. Here you can see the detail of those rings that I put in. I like how that went together. Let me know what you think overall. Is this something you'd like to have on your kitchen table, or do you think it's a little on the gaudy side? Leave a comment, let me know.